The LLM is pulling reviews from Facebook, from Instagram, from TikTok, from Reddit, Quora, and everywhere else to build this tree that's far beyond your own website. And it makes SEO feel like it's an anchor, like a foundational anchor, like a building, like the foundation of a building, I guess. How are you guys seeing brand being represented across the internet affect your customers' marketing campaigns today?
A number one signal, a negative review and how it's resolved, the intelligence behind these LLMs. When it computes, it'll spit out and say, here's what people said about XYZ company. And it'll list them, so many reviews and some samples, right? Good, better, and different. This company is okay. You know, they've got 3.6 out of 4 stars on Google.
So one of the most important pages for the LLMs to check out is the About Us page, right? It's like, we want to know about this firm, it ought to be on this page. But if you actually go and read most About Us pages for most law firms, it's just all blah, blah, blah.
One thing I've noticed, even in my own searches, is that the LLMs seem to be ahead of me on the product or service that I might need. And so, you know, like I've been doing a lot of my own kind of tinkering in with some offline LLM stuff. And there's a lot of tools that I'm just not familiar with. And it's just telling me, hey, you could set this up with this tool.
Welcome to another episode of SEO On-Air. I'm your host, Koa Kauwe from Stan Ventures. We've got 3 guests with us, all with different experience that I'm excited to have on. We're going to talk a lot about the history of SEO, the cycles that we see in SEO, and how we see the industry changing today. So with us today, I'm going to give you each a chance to introduce yourself, starting with Ramsey. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your agency, please.
Well, thank you for having me, Koa. My name is Ramsey Sweis. I'm founder and chief strategist for Aqaba Digital. We are a smart business intelligence advertising agency, and we're driven by data and measurements.
We're going to have to unpack all that throughout the podcast because the data and measurements is something that's been very much relevant in the conversation of marketing agencies today. Thanks for joining us, Ramsey.
Thank you for having me.
George, please tell us a little bit about yourself and your agency.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me, first off, and nice to meet everybody here. So I'm George Little. I'm the founder of a B2B design consultancy called BrandZap. At the root of it, we focus on helping growth stage companies, usually startups, solopreneurs, largely in the tech sector, kind of refine their brands and kind of grow out of their early startup branding phase of the PowerPoint logo, et cetera, and kind of mature their brands such that they can go to market. So a lot of the stuff that we end up working on is redoing the actual kind of branding proper as far as like the graphic identity, logo colors, that sort of stuff, but also rebuilding the website. Usually are launching a new website and typically in a kind of product focused manner, meaning that it's supposed to be made of components and sort of set for the newest, era of SEO or AI SEO or whatever you want to call it. So a lot of my clients end up, we work a lot of times like in bed with them on the team, which is a little bit different than a typical agency model. We try to operate more on like a subscription such that we are a fractional extension of usually marketing and design teams. So great to be here and excited to kind of dig into, first off, whatever we're calling AI SEO. That's the first thing I want to know.
Happy to have you. I think one of the things that I thought was fascinating talking to you is that it's very easy to build a website now with AI, but whether or not that website is functional for the actual consumer and is like really delivering the story that they want is a really cool message that I think you can help us deliver. So thanks for joining us. Nathan, last but not least, tell us a little bit about your experience and your agency.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. Yeah. So I'm Nathan Chapman. I'm president of Firmidable. We're a marketing agency in our 35th year, and all we do is work for law firms. When I started the agency, the first website would not be invented for 2 more months. So we're big into branding and traditional, but at some point, I said, if we don't become masters of digital marketing, we're not going to survive. And it's kind of interesting. That's exactly the same message that I gave our team this past year. When it's like, if we don't get on top of AI, we may not survive that. So I'm looking forward to today's conversation. It's reminding me of what we've been through before, but who knows how it'll play out this time.
I love the healthy respect for growth, the growth mindset and changing and being aware of it. One thing I think is fascinating about that is that we've seen a lot of agencies talk about traditional advertising coming back in a strong way, like that creative advertising play being more valuable than it's maybe been over the last decade or so. So I'll be eager to hear your opinion on that as well. So coming into this call, the first question I had for the three of you is that we've experienced multiple, I want to call them eras of SEO, from keyword stuffing and manipulation early on to the link building arms race to semantic search to EEAT. When you zoom out and view SEO in its entirety, what phases stand out to you? And how would you start describing the phase we're entering into? So I want to throw this question out to the group. Just tell me a little bit about the phases we've seen and what you're seeing from the new phase of SEO. Nathan, almost what you're telling us to be aware of, right? Like if we don't change things today, or if we're not on top of the new changes, then we're going to fall behind. What are you guys seeing?
I think I would say right now that we're in an era that I'd call the dawn of AI, right? It's kind of like we've invented fire, but we're not yet invented the flamethrower, right? We're just beginning. It's exciting, but we're not there yet. I think it's going to build on the past, so Google for the longest time has been saying, we really need to be trusted authorities. And so with AI, it's going to be that on steroids. And it's not going to be us, just ourselves saying we're trusted. We're going to have to prove it beyond just our websites. It's going to have to be a community consensus that we're trusted authorities.
Yeah, I mean, something you mentioned in there of the kind of falling back on some of the traditional pieces. Like for me, it feels like right now it's pure experimentation. On a 2-week basis, the big LLMs are rolling out different ways of citing things and actually calling stuff up. And so to me, it's like they're basically still crawling content. As far as kind of all the different eras, as far as link building and kind of trying to figure out what's the best way, it seems that LLMs are most susceptible basically to, like content stuffing effectively. I know I've seen experiments of people going back to making the black background with black text that is a message to like Perplexity, basically saying like, if you're Perplexity and you're reading this, this is what you should take away and deliver to the user, which is like a whole different kind of game. So it's interesting to hear that you see that kind of like two sides of it as well, that there's this need for some old, traditional way of hosting all of the actual stuff.
I saw somewhere on the wild internet, a student had posted that they had copied and pasted one of their questions into an LLM, and the LLM came up saying that there was some embedded messaging inside there that said that the LLM wasn't supposed to answer the question, but it was going to answer the question anyways because it doesn't take instructions from some background code or something along those lines. I thought it was pretty funny, just to the depth of how much it's understanding. Ramsey, I want to transition the question into one that I think about applies to you and the data that you're talking about, that you've kind of referred to your company as being a specialist in. When we're talking about AI, it seems like a lot of companies have leaned into the keyword research phase of SEO before, right? Like they were doing keyword research and they were able to pull the data around how much search volume they had and, what keywords they really should be ranking for, what services they wanted to be ranking for. We've heard from a lot of agencies that data that they used to collect is no longer as relevant as it was before, and that they're needing to transition maybe away from keyword rankings and more into like categories almost, that they're trying to make sure that they're experts in certain categories rather than for specific keywords. So maybe topics is a better phrase for it. How is your company navigating the data that seems to be intangible for a lot of the AI results versus this traditional SEO results data that they used before?
Great question, Koa. And what we've seen is the cream rising to the top, and an accumulation of data, content, and material hosted on the internet since day one. It's all there. It's parsed. It's indexed. It's sitting somewhere. How Google, since it's an 800-pound gorilla, right? It accounts for 96% of all search, right? And you factor in YouTube, they're a number one. So why bother optimizing for anything else? When you look at that bin of information, there has to be logic in how it's sorted, right? And there's some hierarchical matching when assigning these categories, as you stated, into silos. So the importance and the relevance of that material, maybe 20 years ago it was relevant, but today it's not because things have progressed naturally, right? So I would say, to answer your question, problem solving, symptoms, right? Solutions to a problem, the problem itself being defined and explained. There's a reverse perspective to that. And for example, let's just say, I bumped into a light pole with my car. So what's a logical question that a search engine should ask? What year, what make vehicle? Is it a plastic bumper? Is it a metal bumper, right?
And what personal injury lawyer should you call? That would be a logical question.
That's all dovetail. I know that's your area of expertise, right? We'll blend you into the mix when I unpack this. So when we look at that information, now you have questions being reflected back to you to help you zoom in on your search, right? Those aren't AI results or AI oriented. AI is the synthetic brain that is going to think, and eventually its compute will surpass, the human compute in fractions of a second than how we process data today. So once we get to that point, that's all going to evolve, just like you had stated, George. Things are progressing along the way. So there's no real formula that I've noticed and that would trend other than logic. Everything is based on human logic. My pattern is to search this way, and then you optimize for that result. So when you get into technical SEO, your content, your relevance, even though they say keyword stuffing is not good, but the frequency of keyword use within a sentence, where it is in a sentence, frequency within a sentence, within a paragraph, within a page. So there's balance, right? And it's not being stuffed. So these types of signals is what warrant a result. Now, is it popular? All the rules don't apply, right? It changes. It's dynamic. That's the beauty of SEO today. And now, contrary to old methods where we were keyword stuffing, there were doorway pages. You had the black background with the black text it's just a billboard of the same keyword or a bundle of keywords. It used to work. People were just clever. That's what SEO is, right? They call that black hat methods. Well, it wasn't black hat at first, and it worked, right? So today, all of those signals still reside. They work against you, and they get pushed further down that silo, categorically speaking. From a general broad perspective, right? The less long tail, the more broad the keyword is, the less valuable it is. Because people want specific, and they're on these devices, which an attention span of a gnat is the only requirement they prefer. That means you need to be right there within that search vein, or you don't matter. So SEO has become very highly weighted, and the credibility, the signals, the domain authority, all these things that come into play will allow you to show up on that mobile device, which is probably mobile first is the most valuable, in my opinion, the most valuable medium.
I have a question for you then, because my take on a lot of the LLMs, the models themselves, is they've effectively gobbled up the majority of the internet. And I can only imagine that they were using Google as a way of finding web pages, just because why wouldn't you? But then for certain pieces, they have to kind of reinvent how search works as far as the actual mechanism sort of within the chatbot and kind of how is it actually going to search through its results. But when I look at I've done some of these kind of tools to try to figure out how does a brand place in an LLM or whatever. And like, big surprise, P&G is still the biggest thing on an LLM, just like it's the biggest thing on Google or whatever. And so like, I guess to the through line is like, it seems like there's this tinkering where we can kind of experiment with different levers of what may have worked in the past, but it's still kind of rooted on the same operating system in a way. That like the big chunks of content out there, the big chunks of backlinks that still exist, to your point, that have been built, are still crawlable and even faster. And kind of like, so I don't know, have you, with your clients, have you found a way to kind of help them position any of the stuff that they have relative to kind of that landscape?
Yes, like say, for example, I'll use a baseline. I'm interested in redoing my sidewalk with brick pavers, right? So if you schema accordingly, it could be a paver brand, like a manufacturer, a producer of brick pavers, that a catalog will show up with a tutorial video, right? That's relevant. And, or the schema will show a how to pave your sidewalk or pave your driveway. And the most valuable content that with the engineered schema in place that is friendly and indexable and processable by the search engine will determine the outcome for AI results, the how-to, the DIY website, the domain authority of that website that has a DIY. Maybe it's a blog, right? A third-party blog, and that user content is generated to provide backlinks to that website. But that blog post is it's a long tail keyword because I'm looking for that specific colored brick or brand of paver, right? And all of that is optimized within the metadata and within all of the tagging and the URL structure of that blog post. So old school SEO is still a number one because you can't align that keyword by just popularity.
Nathan, I want to bring you in on this and get your perspective of how SEO has changed. I think that there's been this interesting conversation about marketing agencies and whether or not they should be selling an AEO service, a GEO service, or whether that's just traditional SEO that is rebranded for their customer today. Do you feel like you've adapted or adopted a strategy that's very AEO, GEO friendly, or do you feel like your traditional SEO practices is the one that is working for your modern customer today?
Yeah, I'm going to go with yes to all of the above, right? So first, I think we need to keep in context that while there's this tsunami coming, it's not quite here yet, right? Now, the ocean sinking, the birds and the animals are headed to the hills. So we need to take action now. But the last time I looked, traditional Google search was 95 billion a month, and visitors to ChatGPT was 5 billion. So Google still dominates. So the good news is that most things that we want to do for, I'll call it AEO, actually make Google happy also. But it's not 100% the same way. We still want to create that trust. But I think in the past we could have just had a website and we just say we're the experts. But now it's not enough for us to claim it ourselves. Kind of like going to a party and you tell everybody you're the expert and nobody thinks it but you, right? And so that's just not going to fly anymore. So I'm seeing more emphasis than ever on reviews. The AI engines aren't just looking at the score and how many you have, but they're actually reading all the comments. And so the more you have, then the more often somebody's going to say, well, he was great at law firm marketing. He knew so much about it, etc. So that makes Google happy, but it also makes the AI happy. We're also grouping our information differently since the LLMs are kind of all about, how they want to understand the big picture, like the entities, right? So we're much more into the relationship of information. So we'll put things into clusters. So we do a lot of Social Security disability work. And so we'll have a whole cluster about Social Security disability, another one about SSI, another one about children's cases. And we just think, okay, let's deep dive in this and make everything about it. So it's both the same, but it's you kind of approach it all differently.
And with those clusters, what's the actual medium there? Is that pure web page, or is it kind of like a larger body of collateral and social media posts and everything combined? Or how do you sort of define that?
Yeah, well, and I was specifically thinking organic and from the web pages. Yes, I will say in the past we would just kind of randomly pick, oh, this is a piece of content that we don't have yet, that people are searching for. but it might just be kind of a standalone. Now it needs to fit in some other place in the narrative on the site, or it's going to fall down on the list of priorities.
There's a level of distrust maybe when you Google search something that Google's going to deliver what you want, or it's going to give you maybe a sponsored ad for something that someone wants you to want. And I think that there's been a nice amount of trust for people using LLMs, that they believe that the LLM is really trying to make the decision that it thinks they want, right? Like there's like a lot of personalization in there. You feed it 10 questions instead of one Google search, and it builds on each of them to understand you at a higher level. That's where I feel like the adoption of LLMs is becoming more, like, I do think that fire is burning pretty quick. We see this in the way people are searching. So when it comes to that, I think that was really, George, to touch on your question there about like that content tree and like where you're distributing that content. It seems like the LLM is pulling reviews from Facebook, from Instagram, from TikTok, from Reddit, Quora, and everywhere else to build this tree that's far beyond your own website. And it makes SEO feel like it's an anchor, like a foundational anchor, like a building, like the foundation of a building, I guess. But there's far more that's being built around there that has more value than just the website itself today. How are you guys seeing brand being represented across the internet affect your customers' marketing campaigns today?
number one signal. A negative review and how it's resolved, the intelligence behind these LLMs, when it computes, it'll spit out and say, here's what people said about XYZ company. And it'll list them, so many reviews and some samples, right? Good, bad, or indifferent. This company is okay. They've got 3.6 out of 4 stars on Google. They don't exist on Yelp, but on Facebook, they got 1 negative review, right? It's up to you to put the pieces of that puzzle together, and it kind of tells a story. But that's a brand signal. It's not just a matter about ranking, because as soon as you rank, the behavior for search and trend is going to change, where I'll be able to not just do a price comparison through these LLMs, but what are the reviews? Instead of trying to go to Amazon and view the first 3, 4, 5 results, click to read more, and to read more, just hit the 4 stars, down to the 1 stars, and all of that can be surmised by a simple instruction if it's not organically providing that service to you as a result when you perform a search on that brand. And the products, not just the brand itself, but a product that resides underneath that brand.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've noticed even in my own searches is that the LLMs seem to be ahead of me on the product or service that I might need. And so, like I've been doing a lot of my own kind of tinkering in with some offline LLM stuff. And there's a lot of tools that I'm just not familiar with. And it's just telling me, hey, you could set this up with this tool. And I'm assuming it's doing a whole collection of reading through Reddit and people complaining about how this isn't user-friendly or whatever. And it goes, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, but he wants to tinker. So here's the perfect middle ground piece of software, for him. And that's before I even decided I needed software at all, which is the part that I'm like, I don't even know how to, I don't know how to strategize around that other than having a website that solves every problem out there in hopes that I can connect the dots and somehow sell a brand out of it,
That's where the AI is always going to be questionable, because your Quoras and your other type of like Medium and Reddit, they become link farms. They're riddled with fodder to get links on highly high quality domain authority, right? Websites or pages, and you'll see a lot of that. And eventually, LLMs is going to be able to pick up on that signal.
I'll give you one that's kind of interesting if we're talking about the brand, and again, I'm through the filter of law firms. So one of the most important pages for the LLMs to check out is the About Us page, right? It's like, if we want to know about this firm, it ought to be on this page. But if you actually go and read most About Us pages for most law firms, it's just all blah, blah, blah. They don't really say anything. And so this is kind of low hanging fruit. It's like, okay, well, what is it about you? What is your history? What is your culture? Actually tell us something. Tell us a real story where we feel like we get to know you. So we're definitely going back and reworking all the About Us pages for all of our sites. And it'll be a better user experience, when we're done, right? I mean, we're going to have to be authentic because we have to be real. We just can't do blah, blah, blah anymore.
The trust aspect comes back to me when you talk about that, where and again, something that George referred to is that these LLMs have crawled every website. Like they have a ton of information. They've done their research. So if you say you're a legal company, great. So is everyone else. The LLM can probably answer most of those questions that someone needs until it becomes really personal. And then how is your company representing itself on like a really detailed level, right? Like, hey, I broke my leg I slipped on some ice outside my apartment. And now it's like, okay, this person has worked with people that have slipped on ice outside their apartment. It gets really, really detailed. At some point, it feels like that content, it's difficult because it's forcing endless creativity out of your customers. And I'm curious, this is maybe like the more negative side of the conversation, but like at what point does the LLM have most of that information? Like, is there any level where this stops? Because now we're talking about content trees that are going so far down. How long does this phase of SEO last where you're really trying to personalize it for each different tree that can go all the way down? That's a tough question to ask. I'm just curious what you guys
technical. So there's technical variance in that answer, and that goes back to domain authority. And I'm speaking your language, Koa, right? Like you're seeking out rich content, highly authoritative websites, credibility, right? You have to be credible. Just because that post is there or that video is playing in screen doesn't necessarily mean it's true. So that's where the relevance comes in. Like, I'm not going to go and buy this pharmaceutical grade, medicine because I saw this video on Facebook. I'm still going to, seek the consultation of a professional, medical practitioner. It's funny. I walked into this orthopedic surgeon's office and for an appointment, and on the right next to the check-in, check-out is a sign, and it says, if you are coming here with examples of how I'm supposed to perform my job, I suggest you go home and consult with your physician, Mr. Google, right? I mean, it's big, bold letters, and it cracks me up each time I go. I see that, and it's so true. But what I'm trying to say is, it's up to you to arm yourself with this information. You have all these amazing tools, right? And you have a brain. You're advanced than many different species walking this earth. Use it. Use some common sense. Make a decision based on the reviews, based on the website. They may rank very well, but the user experience is poor. And then, so what does that tell you? There's no phone number above the fold. There's no call to action above the fold. You're going to rank, but there's probably a high bounce rate, right? And then the about page, learn more, right? A free takeaway, maybe retargeting. There's so many things that you can do to elevate your brand in a very cost-effective manner. But once you get there, you don't just let it sit. Because as you had stated, George, eventually it degrades over time. And what's the value of that material? It gets pushed further down into that categoric silo that we mentioned earlier.
I mean, just to kind of pivot off of that and to the kind of question of the trust, right? Like, if when it comes down to at the heart of it, the reviews are there to kind of give you some validation that some other human has done this. For some of the brands I've worked with, I've encouraged them to accept the fact that nobody's going to take a website at face value anymore. Even the reviews, you can't trust that they're there, right? That they're real. Even like the whole Amazon review farm thing sort of tosses reviews out. Maybe Trustpilot or a handful of these you can really trust. So to your point of sort of like, what is the benefit of us searching versus having our own brain? Well, it's the connecting the dots. So I always encourage the brands I work with. I'm like, you have your website, that's Avenue A. Avenue B is you have to talk about this thing as a human perspective against the brand, right? Like, what are you doing as part of the team? What are you doing as a partnership? Why did you choose these people as opposed to just the brand? And I say scrub the M dashes. Even if you were a great M dash person since 1980 and it's been ruined for you, you have to remove them, right? Or throw in a spelling mistake in your social posts, because it brings that kind of human nuance back to, this is a group of people that I can trust behind a brand, especially in B2B. Like at the end of the day, you're signing something with somebody. You want to make sure that there's a bridge between the website nonsense and the actual people that you're kind of communicating with.
The typo, though, could be an issue, because depending on the industry, like if you're legal or medical and you're trying to seem natural, your value kind of.
My lawyer misspelled something on my.
Yeah. If it's a comment on a LinkedIn post from the company, that's one thing, right? If it's an announcement, yeah, without a doubt. Because you also want to make sure that you show yourself as the right team for the job, not the fact that you're just breathing.
The trust factors thing, I want Nathan to plug in here. You've worked with lawyers. LLM has definitely like created unique searches for people that are trying to get themselves out of some legal trouble and then ultimately find out they may not want to trust it, right? And may end up calling a lawyer anyways. What are you seeing on your side of things with how LLMs are affecting search for lawyers?
And Google has not always, but in more recent years, held us to a higher standard, that if somebody screws up a brownie recipe, it's not the end of the world. But in medical and legal, they really do hold you to a higher standard, and will punish you if for some reason you don't seem trustworthy. So it's more of the same. This is why I guess I'm not doom and gloom about, well, we're all going to be out of business for AI. Technology usually builds upon the previous technology. So, for example, in classic SEO H1, the headlines to tell what is this page about. Well, who thought of the headlines? Oh, it's the old technology, newspapers and magazines, right? So I think everything's just going to kind of keep building upon these principles we've been working on. We just need to do them better. Just everybody needs to up their game, and in the end, it's kind of exciting.
So that's as you guys were talking, I was thinking about how websites are getting they're getting easier to make. And you can have an AI tool help you make a website that has a great structure, it has schema, it has everything in place, right? Like you could have a really, really well-built website. That's great news for search, isn't it? That everyone's website will be more available.
Do me a favor, call up a search term that has a website built by AI, and I'm gonna send you a subscription to Stitch Fix for a year.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, my thought is that like a library has to be well organized for everyone to find the book they want. And the internet has been dominated by technical SEOs for the last decade because it took a technical SEO person to make it so that Google could find your website and understand your services and everything else. And I even thought about like personalities. And when I'm shopping, it's the sales rep that connects with me that's the one I buy from. It's not the one that knew the most about the product necessarily.
But there was a training between the salesperson and how they interface with the company as the face, right? The front man person, and is going to speak that nomenclature. And you talk about tonality and value and some stickiness in the material that they provide. That's not something that AI can do. And it's still, to build a website, you got to understand your persona. Right? And that research is performed. You can use AI to help you research and come up with that supporting data and the analytics, plugging that in. Like, for example, I have a set AI team, and I call them my board of directors. And I'll have a virtual call that's recorded, transcript is provided. and I take that transcript, I'll plug it in, and I'll tell my board of directors to grade me. How was that sales call? How was this meeting, our first call, right? Because I've uploaded our sales process. It understands our process. It has a grading system that I've kind of used to my personalized for me. And then that material is parsed, indexed, and processed in fractions of a second. It comes back with, a backline draft that says, here's how you can improve. Here's what you missed within your process. And as a result, it costs you this much in sales. Guess what? I'm elevating my game, baby, because AI is changing the way I perform my sales, because I missed out on some things. I'm only human. The AI is going to carry me. It's not going to do my sales job for me, but it's going to carry me. It's going to help me improve. Same thing with the website. Still, there's a human element that AI can never replace. It's got to understand your target audience. You can teach it to go out and say, okay, here's my CRM system. I've got everything properly indexed categorically. Here are the regions, male, female, all the demographics. Here's the history of sales per client. Here's the average. Process it and tell me, how do I increase my average ticket price with my existing customer base? And it's going to tell you how to do that, right? That's to do that. I'll create a sales page. It'll assist me, but I need to, the construct of that is up to me to decide. Graphics, tonality, color, the color palette, buying patterns, all of that data that the AI is going to help you manage. For me to do that, to generate those reports and manually sift through that information, I just won't do it. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. So as you build out these websites, say even if it was an AI tool building a website, it can get it technically very sound.
Sure.
But there's
sure,
like,
it's
like going into
business.
going into the car dealership and telling them what to fix on your car. It's like you had this strategy that was built by AI, but if you have never really spent time in the vehicle, you didn't know all the stuff that needed to be pulled out or all the details or really the complex angles. I want
to be critical of you, Koa. I'm just saying, as a practitioner doing it for 24, 25 years, when Google first went public, I was very lucky early on to experience these things. I'm showing my age, right? I'm giving it away, but I was there. I saw it. I experienced it. I learned these things firsthand. To get to where we are today, I'm blown away by the advancements. And I'm really excited to see what's coming down the pipeline in the future once AI gets its act together, because it's going to change the industry as we know it.
So one thing I will put a counter argument to is that these LLM website builders will say Lovable, Wix AI Studio, whatever you want to, Squarespace Studio, whatever you want to call it, are actually good for startups. I think they're actually really problematic, and they go in the opposite direction of the problem we were dealing with like 2-3 years ago, right? So my approach to a lot of these into the market is more from a design perspective, less than a kind of content or SEO perspective. So the question that I used to get is, I have this website, or my company has this website. We made it on Squarespace. We can't do X, Y, and Z, right? And at least then I was like, okay, I know what it's made of, right? Like I know in an instant that you can't scale this, and I know what to tell you to do. And I can slide into my pitch about Webflow and we're off to the races, right? Now I made this thing unlovable. We've changed our product 5 times and I keep having to try to change the thing. And now it's this big soup. So can you change the colors? And I'm like, no, right? But like I can help you start over, right? But the face value thing for me as someone trying to effectively like get website jobs is to avoid the like, if they're going to try to build it on their own, they're going to do that regardless and before they tried to contact me anyway. And at face value, to me, the Lovable is not my competition. It's Squarespace's competition. It's Wix's competition. It's that sort of entry level thing. And usually the problems that these companies have is like they can't get an image to look good, or they're not showing up on Google. And in that case, the not showing up on Google is the easy way off of that platform. It's like, well, yeah, we can't do all the technical stuff that you would need to be able to do on this platform anyway. So we're going to get you off, and along the way, we're going to make a better website out of it. And again, can an AI do that? It might tell you to go do that, and hopefully it'll tell you to use me. I doubt it. But like at a certain point, the role of the website designer or the website agency is to effectively be like, yeah, good job at taking the stab at this. Now you know some things that we don't want to do. And I always go like, let me see the versions. What did you try? Like, what did you not like? Because I can save myself a bunch of iterations of trying to kind of put together a strategy for them, to ultimately, get them to realize that this isn't one asset. It's a long portion of your brand that you have to just kind of learn to live with and start to grow with effectively.
I don't disagree with you at all for the startups. I had mentioned, good for the small business, the DIYers. They're very cost effective from that standpoint, but you never own that intellectual property, the rankings and whatnot. So it's not something that's transferable.
Yeah, what I find interesting is there's all this talk about, so will AI replace all of us? But if you imagine lawyers going and saying, okay, I want to rank and be number one for my practice area in my town, well, they would all do that, right? It's a paradox. They can't all be number one. And so they're getting all the same information from the LLMs. I think you have to have humans, right? And in fact, the LLMs go out and get all this information about what is everybody else doing, and then they kind of, put it together for you. It's like, well, the ones who are going to stand out are actually the ones doing something different from everybody else. You got to do the basics. There's certain fundamentals you have to do, but just, tell me how to be like everybody else is not a recipe for leadership.
Well, we're all very savvy and successful business people here. And if I can just state this, and attorneys are good at law, and they should stay in their lane and let the agencies figure out what the next step is, because SEO, as we know, is not a one and done thing. It's not an item that you just include in your web build and then you're off to the next chasing the next project. It just doesn't work that way.
So the last question I have for you guys, because we're just about out of time here, as we get to the point where people can build a website, and obviously there's flaws in that, everyone would be potentially building the same website because all the content would be pretty much regurgitated from some other place that it's been found on the internet when it's made. So it'd be about the same. What part of the agency is not automatable? What part of your agency is the part that that website will never match?
I mean, the guidance and the nuance context for me, right? Like, even if we say that the context windows on these LLMs will expand indefinitely so that they can remember everything, every conversation you ever had, and put together a really nuanced response to a prompt. Humans are always going to still be aware of the technology doing something, and guiding guiding clients through the process of like, you're making this thing for other humans. You're not making your service to make it into a product. Is been the only like through line that I really see for being able to kind of pivot the services and move away from pure asset delivery to, we're going to guide you along your asset creation and the ops that you're working on, because otherwise it is very easy to keep falling back into, we're delivering X things at some pace that will always be compared to, I can get this same number of things from an LLM. At an increasing quality, right? So it needs to be more like, well, we'll help you suggest of how to get those things out of it. So even brand guides now, I'm starting to include in brand guides image prompts for people to use in Nano Banana. Like, this is how I made the images on your website. So if you want to make more of them, use this prompt, kind of thing, which is like not something I'd ever thought I'd be doing, like giving away the sauce, right? But I'm like, but it's the only thing that I can give at this point relative to them making a website unlovable. Yeah, anyway, so that's my kind of take on it.
I'll tell you what keeps me up at night about AI is that they might take over all the missiles. It's like, I'm not worried about them taking over SEO. If they can automate citations good, I think that's a really stupid thing that we have to do, currently, and I would love for that to be automated. So it's the low level things that are going to take over, and I'm glad about that. But but the high level thinking and the branding and what is your market positioning strategy, I think there's always going to be a need for us in that, and we'll figure out the tools.
I see an evolution that's right around the corner of web design, which in effect will have touch PPC, SEO, social media, etc. And that's interactive. A website is going to be a living thing. It'll be a living interaction in real time, answering questions. And maybe it's video driven, but I foresee the industry shifting with, probably the next generation, as my guess would be AI evolves. And when that compute is there, the hosting revolution will roll in and take over, and things will just uplift and carry all of that, above the fold.
Well, guys, we're out of time for today. I feel like we're still halfway in a conversation, so I apologize. I have to cut us off here. The one thing I feel like I'm connecting with right now is that there's when you talk about sales, you talk about pitching the value of something, not the specs of something. And I feel like when we're talking about AI, what it does a really good job of is giving the specifications, but it doesn't connect to the user the value all the time. And I feel like that's where marketing agencies are really translating even what their customer says into usable marketing resources, tools, strategies. And that's where I feel like the huge difference comes from the agencies that we have on today. As I appreciate you being guests of us on SEO On Air, and hopefully we can have you join us again soon. Thanks for being here.